In the early hours of this morning, along the northeastern front, the city of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest, stands just 30 kilometers from the border, a familiar flashpoint in this conflict. Kharkiv has consistently been a prime target for Moscow, notably during Russia's initial invasion attempt in 2022. Despite that failed push, the Kremlin never abandoned its ambitions for the city. The most critical phase of Russia's spring-summer 2026 offensive plan was specifically allocated to this front. The objective was clear: establish a buffer zone around Vovchansk, shield the Belgorod Oblast from Ukrainian artillery and drone attacks, and advance to a position capable of maintaining constant artillery pressure on Kharkiv. Capturing Vovchansk would significantly ease Russian ground and artillery assaults on Kharkiv. This strategic importance explains the high price Moscow was willing to pay for this relatively small town. Beginning in late 2025, Russia amassed a substantial force in the region. Units from the 69th Motorized Infantry Division, operating under the 6th Combined Arms Army, alongside Kadyrov's Akmat forces, were redeployed towards Vovchansk. Their tactics involved small group infiltration, sustained artillery barrages, and coordinated attacks, all aimed at eroding Ukrainian defensive lines. The strategic objective was multi-layered. These objectives included preventing Ukraine from shifting forces to the main offensive in Donetsk by tying down its northern resources, seizing a portion of the Kharkiv Oblast to declare new territorial gains, and projecting the message on Russian state television that Russia was actively defending its borders. However, in a significant development, Ukraine launched a counteroffensive between April and May of 2026, completely turning this meticulously planned strategy on its head. Vovchansk, situated just 5 to 6 kilometers from the Russian border, is no longer a point of Russian advancement. Instead, it has become a fiercely contested front line, and the unfolding events there have entirely upended the Kremlin's calculations. At the heart of this breakthrough was the 23rd Assault Battalion, a component of the Khartia 2nd Corps of the Ukrainian National Guard. This battalion executed a coordinated assault operation within one of the front's most formidable sectors. Assault groups breached the Russian contact line, systematically clearing forward defensive positions all the way to the depths of company-level fortifications. This operation marks the first time in months that Ukraine, largely on the defensive, has launched a meaningful counteroffensive in this region, emphatically demonstrating its sustained offensive capabilities despite relentless Russian pressure. This shift from a prolonged defensive posture to a meaningful counteroffensive is notable because it challenges the prevailing narrative of Ukraine being solely on the defensive, indicating a strategic flexibility that belies the resource disparity often cited in historical conflicts. It suggests a capacity for localized initiative even under immense pressure, a departure from typical attrition warfare. To fully grasp the operation's immense difficulty, one must visualize the battlefield. The area surrounding Vovchansk has been utterly devastated by months of intense fighting. Picture this: destroyed buildings, roads riddled with mines, omnipresent drone surveillance, and unceasing artillery fire. Half the town has been leveled, the remaining structures pockmarked with holes. Streets are choked with rubble and shrapnel. Every window presents a potential sniper position. Every crater could conceal a mine. Drones constantly circle overhead. Advancing under such conditions is far more perilous than defending, as the attacking force can be detected and struck at any moment. A video released by the regiment shows Ukrainian assault units pushing through heavily damaged urban areas and dense forested terrain amidst active combat. The operation's success hinged on flawless coordination between infantry, reconnaissance, and support units. Foreign volunteers from Latin America also served alongside these forces. The regiment's official announcement stated, and I quote, "The 23rd Assault Regiment, RUG, continues to carry out combat missions in the front's most challenging sectors, demonstrating the effectiveness of coordinated assault operations. The tangible results of this operation were swiftly reflected on the frontline map. Significant progress was achieved around the village of Staritsia and within the forested area north of it. Staritsia lies merely 4 to 5 kilometers from the Russian border. In essence, Ukraine is now almost within striking distance of the border itself. This proximity is profoundly troubling for Russia, as such a close distance allows Ukrainian artillery, drones, and reconnaissance systems to directly monitor the other side of the border. Clearing these forested areas may appear minor on a map, but in reality, it is an exceptionally arduous task. Forest lines do not clear themselves. Every tree can offer shelter, every bush an ambush point, every ditch a potential minefield. Russia had been attempting to utilize these areas as fortifications and turn them into shelters. Ukraine successfully dislodged them, and every meter cleared further weakened Russia's position in this region. During the same period, clearance operations also targeted Russian positions in the direction of Vilka. Ukrainian forces advanced to the immediate vicinity of the village, seized key positions, and recaptured some areas in the southeastern part of Vovchansk. When both these gains are considered collectively, a clear picture emerges. Russia's month-long attempt to establish a buffer zone has been locally reversed. These advances were not confined solely to Vovchansk. Ukraine is actively applying counterpressure across the entire northeastern front. During this same time frame, Ukraine exerted counterpressure in the Kupiansk direction, and some reports indicate localized activity near Svatove. There are indications that Russian forces have been pushed back south of Krylia-Kivka. This line has been seen for months as the axis of Russia's second buffer zone initiative, and here too, Russia is failing to achieve the strategic depth it seeks. Looking at the Kharkiv region as a whole, we observe Ukraine's consistent application of a model that transitions from defense to offense. For months, Russia has attempted to advance in this region, using infiltration tactics, small group attacks, and constant artillery pressure. But Ukraine responds to every infiltration attempt with a counterattack, fortifies the cleared areas, and then establishes a stronger defensive line for the next Russian assault. This hold, clear, fortify cycle is steadily eroding Russia's offensive momentum with each round. It must be acknowledged that these successes represent small-scale tactical gains. They do not constitute a breakthrough that fundamentally alters the game across the entire front, but every successful Ukrainian counterattack further erodes the Kremlin's narrative. Russia's claim of an undisputed initiative everywhere is crumbling here, precisely because Ukraine is maintaining its local offensive capacity even in sectors where Russia is trying to assert control. So, what is the current status of Russia's overall offensive plan? Independent observers have geolocated approximately 3,000 artillery, mortar, and airstrikes along the front, stretching from Zaporizhia to Donetsk between February and May of 2026. This sheer volume of documented strikes underscores the unprecedented intensity of modern conventional warfare, where advanced surveillance allows for granular tracking of battlefield activity. Historically, such precise, real-time data on enemy fire would be unattainable, highlighting a new dimension of transparency and accountability in conflict. These data reveal two critical areas of concentration, the Orikhiv sector in Zaporizhia and the line just north of Pokrovsk. These 2 points clearly indicate the main axes of attack Russia planned for its summer 2026 offensives. The Kremlin is heavily concentrating its resources in these areas. A notable shift in targets has occurred in the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka sector. In 2025, Russia was attempting to drive a wedge between the cities of Donetsk and Druzhkivka. In 2026, however, it shifted its strategy to a plan to encircle Donetsk from the southeast. But a critical reality the Kremlin did not account for here is this. Despite the loss of Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, Ukrainian resistance in this region has been largely successful. The front line has remained largely unchanged. In other words, Russia failed to convert the advantage of capturing these two cities into a strategic gain. It seized territory, but the fundamental equation of the conflict did not change. Ukraine's 7th Rapid Reaction Corps reported that Russia's 90th Tank Division had been detected in Pokrovsk and that Russian forces were using the city to gather personnel and equipment. Russia is amassing significant forces here, attempting to encircle Hrdivka, establish command posts in Mirnohrad, and create conditions for an advance toward Rinska. Ukrainian units in the region have eliminated or wounded 329 Russian soldiers since early May. They have destroyed or damaged over 40 pieces of equipment, including critical artillery systems. While these figures originate from Ukrainian sources, They concretely illustrate the sheer scale and intensity of the fighting in this sector. Pokrovsk serves as a stark reminder that Russia's war machine remains heavy and dangerous. The Kremlin will not back down here because the goal of fully capturing the Donbass is one of the cornerstones of President Putin's political legitimacy. Russia has been paying an incredible price for this for months, yet the equation remains unchanged. Hundreds of soldiers, hundreds of vehicles, and tons of ammunition are lost for every square kilometer advanced, pushing Russia forward at the tactical level, but simultaneously weakening it at the strategic level. But here's the critical point. Heavy machinery demands roads, staging areas, fuel, ammunition, repair zones, and robust supply lines. If the bridges connecting the battlefield to the system that feeds it fail, the machinery grinds to a halt. And Ukraine has begun striking precisely these bridges. By blockading the logistics network stretching from Mariupol to Pokrovsk with drones, Ukraine is transforming Russia's rear area into an extension of the battlefield. Mariupol, the city under Russian occupation since May 2022, is the most striking example of this strategy. Ukrainian troops are not advancing through the streets of Mariupol. They have not yet liberated the city. But footage released by the 1st Azov Corps reveals something else entirely. Ukrainian reconnaissance and attack drones are patrolling the roads around occupied Mariupol, 160 kilometers behind the front lines. They are actively tracking and striking Russian military movements. Mariupol is not just a dot on the map. Siege, destruction, the Azovstal resistance, captivity, and Russian propaganda are all layered within this single city. Moscow has attempted to turn Mariupol into proof that it can destroy, occupy, and incorporate territory into its narrative of empire. But drones pay no heed to propaganda murals. In assessing this development, the Institute for the Study of War noted that Ukrainian forces are utilizing drones to detect and attack Russian ground supply lines in the occupied areas of Donetsk Oblast. Geolocated footage showing Ukrainian attacks on Russian vehicles along the T-0509 Mariupol-Donetsk highway was recorded. Similar activities were reported along the M14 route toward the occupied areas of Zaporizhia and Kherson. What does this mean? Russia's rear area is no longer operating in silence. A truck driver who believes the road is safe drives in one direction. A driver who knows drones are hunting the same route behaves very differently. The commander awaiting supplies does the same. Every delay, every reroute, every moment of fear slows down the flow of supplies reaching the front lines. Drones do not fully replace the kind of air power NATO would use to strike Russian supply lines from above, but they are beginning to create similar effects. This is the drone-era version of battlefield air interdiction. The emotional dimension is simpler. Ukraine has not yet returned to Mariupol with flags. But Russian logistics around Mariupol are no longer operating in silence, and that alone is significant. And when this complex picture is combined with the successes at Vovchansk, a serious strategic problem emerges for Russia. In the north, Ukraine is closing in on the border, forcing Russian forces into a defensive posture. Russia's offensive momentum in this region, sustained for months, has been decisively broken. In the south, Ukrainian drones are striking Russia's rear areas, severely complicating logistics. Even at depths of 95 to 160 kilometers, Russian convoys are no longer safe. In the center, along the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka line, Russia has failed to achieve a decisive breakthrough, despite heavy troop concentrations, and the cost per square kilometer continues to rise. Across all three axes, Moscow's narrative of "we're advancing, time is on our side" is visibly cracking. Advances toward Vovchansk have disrupted Russia's plan to create a buffer zone in Kharkiv at the tactical level. While these successes do not constitute a major breakthrough, they are slowing Russia's overall offensive momentum and granting Ukraine both precious time and a significant morale boost. In particular, the clearings in Staditsia and Vilka are complicating Russian logistics. They are tying down Russia's northern forces, thereby preventing them from fully concentrating on the main offensive in Donetsk. Akmat units were among the most active Russian forces in this region, and Kadyrov had personally promised victory here. Ukraine's advances have rendered that promise void, and are directly undermining Kadyrov's prestige. The man who promised victory is now firmly on the defensive. Criticism that our borders are not being protected may intensify among nationalist circles within Chechnya. Ukraine's advance so close to the border provides not only a psychological, but also a significant operational advantage. Russian positions 4 to 5 kilometers beyond the border are now squarely within range of Ukrainian artillery and drones. This creates a favorable position for sabotage, reconnaissance, and cross-border drone operations. A large-scale cross-border operation akin to the 2024 Kursk operation is currently unlikely because Ukraine's strategy is based on active defense coupled with advancing the defensive line. However, small-scale infiltrations, sabotage, and drone raids are steadily increasing. Ukraine is already regularly deploying drones and reconnaissance groups to these areas. As these developments unfold on the front lines, the methods Ukraine is employing are actively shaping the future of this war. In the Vovchansk operation, the 23rd Assault Regiment seamlessly combined classic infantry tactics with unmanned systems. Reconnaissance drones meticulously mapped every trench and bunker. FPV drones harassed Russian positions, and ground assault groups advanced under this crucial support. Humans and machines worked together at every stage of the operation. This represents one of the most successful implementations of the active defense plus local counterattack model Ukraine has developed throughout 2026. Ukraine is also deploying new AI-supported defense systems on the battlefield. Fiber optic drones, controlled via physical cables and impervious to Russia's electronic warfare systems, are becoming increasingly common on the front lines. AI-powered turrets are being tested to detect and shoot down Russian UAVs, and ground robots are no longer experimental equipment. Over 24,500 robotic missions were carried out in the first quarter of 2026. This staggering number of robotic missions signals a profound shift in military doctrine, moving beyond experimental deployment to large-scale integration of unmanned systems into daily operations. It suggests a future where human soldiers are increasingly augmented or even replaced by autonomous platforms for routine or high-risk tasks, a significant evolution from past conflicts. Ukraine is not merely launching counterattacks, it is technologically transforming both defense and offense. So, what does President Putin have left? The buffer zone plan in Kharkiv has collapsed. Forces in the north have been pushed into a defensive posture, and the rear area is no longer secure. But Russia remains dangerous, and Putin still has a few cards on the table. The first card, the summer offensive. The concentration of the 90th Tank Division around Pokrovsk and in the Orikhiv sector indicates that Russia is planning a major offensive in Donetsk throughout the summer. The Kremlin's logic is simple: to compensate for losses in the north by gaining ground in the southeast. But this offensive will inevitably follow the same attrition model: thousands of soldiers, hundreds of vehicles, massive casualties, and ultimately gains of just a few square kilometers. And Ukraine's drone network, growing stronger by the day, will only increase that cost. The second card, mobilization. The Kremlin has been trying to close the personnel gap for months, with secret, wave-by-wave calls for reservists, but it fears declaring a full mobilization. The partial mobilization in 2022 led to mass desertions and widespread protests. Putin may be forced to play this card, but if he does, the home front will likely explode. The third card, the energy war. Russia has systematically targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure over the past 3 winters. The same brutal strategy is planned for the 2026 to 2027 winter, aiming to cripple Ukraine's heating and electricity systems to force the civilian population into surrender. But Ukraine has strengthened its defenses after every winter, and Western allies are accelerating air defense deliveries. The fourth card, diplomacy. Putin is reportedly using former President Trump to pressure for a ceasefire and negotiations, conveying the message, "The momentum is on our side. Let's make a deal now." But the stark realities on the front lines directly refute this claim. As long as Ukraine does not back down and Western support continues, Putin's diplomacy card remains weak. And the fifth card, the nuclear threat, which remains on the table. but it grows less credible with each passing day. The Kremlin has been waving this card for 4 years, but has not played it because the cost of playing it is far heavier than the cost of not playing it. In conclusion, all the cards in Putin's hand are either risky, costly, or increasingly ineffective. The buffer zone in the north has collapsed, logistics in the south are under attack, and the war of attrition in the center is wearing Russia down while the patience of its own people is running out. The Kremlin can still attack, it can still inflict damage, but it cannot advance in the direction it desires. In short, Russia continues to draw the map in one direction. But the front line doesn't always move that way. It may still be too early to declare a definitive turning point in this war. But one thing is now undeniably clear. President Putin's assumption that time is on my side is crumbling a little more with each passing week. For Putin, Vovchansk wasn't just a village. It was the gateway to Kharkiv, a buffer zone in his imagination, and a matter of profound prestige. That gateway has now closed, not in Ukraine's face, but in Putin's.